Hey everyone, and welcome. So what if I told you that the best way to handle life's biggest, most paralyzing questions isn't to find the right answer? We're going to dive into a really fascinating idea today that completely flips that script. It's all about learning how to navigate all that uncertainty, not by chasing answers, but by actually falling in love with the questions themselves.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with a feeling I think we all know way too well. You know, it's 3 in the morning, you're staring at the ceiling, and your mind is just racing about some huge life decision. That heart-pounding, chest-tightening anxiety, well, that's exactly where this whole idea kicks off. It's a feeling the author just nails. So, that feeling, it's not just you being an overthinker. Nope, it's actually a specific psychological state, and there's real science behind it. So if we're going to figure out how to deal with it, first we've got to understand what's actually going on inside our own heads. And here's the key. Psychologists have a really precise definition for this. See, uncertainty isn't just about not having enough information. No, it's a sense of doubt that blocks or delays action. Think about that. In other words, it doesn't just make us feel confused, it literally freezes us in our tracks. It's the reason we end up doom scrolling for hours instead of, actually applying for that job. It's that classic analysis paralysis.
And get this, it turns out our brains are basically wired to hate this feeling. There's even a name for it, the need for closure. Our minds crave an answer, any answer, so badly that we'll often just leap to a conclusion, even if it's based on the flimsiest evidence, just to make that awful discomfort of not knowing go away.
So this really deep-seated need we have to escape uncertainty, well, it doesn't just make us feel anxious, it actually makes us vulnerable. And that vulnerability? Well, it creates the absolute perfect conditions for a trap that honestly a lot of us fall right into.
Yeah, this vulnerability is like a gold mine for what the author calls the charlatans of certainty. You know who I'm talking about. The gurus, the slick online programs, the systems that promise a fast, easy, one-size-fits-all solution to your biggest, most complex problems. They know we're desperate, and they prey on that desire to just make the anxiety stop. Now.
And this chart does a brilliant job of showing the difference between real helpful guidance and a total trap. It's this idea of open versus closed systems. See, open systems are all about empowering you. They invite you to explore, they encourage questions, and the goal is for you to eventually graduate. But closed systems, totally different. They give you the answer, and then, when it inevitably doesn't work perfectly, they insist the problem is you, which just keeps you hooked on buying more seminars, more products.
So the most important thing here is learning how to spot these red flags. I mean, if a system tells you its method is perfect and if it fails, you're the problem, that's a huge red flag. Or if they discourage you from asking critical questions, telling you not to be a tire kicker, you're probably dealing with a closed system.
Okay, so if desperately searching for answers can actually be a trap, then what's the alternative, right? Where does that leave us? Well, this next idea is really the heart of it all. It's a total, fundamental shift in how we look at the problem.
And the alternative comes from, it comes from a letter written by the poet Rainer Maria Rilke, like over a century ago. He told a young writer not to go searching for the answers, but to, and I love this, try to love the questions themselves. Don't try to solve them, live them.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds a lot like embrace uncertainty, which can feel like such a hollow, kind of useless platitude, right? But this is different. Loving the questions is an active stance. It's not just about gritting your teeth and tolerating anxiety. It's about actively engaging with life's big mysteries with a sense of curiosity, turning the whole thing into an adventure of self-discovery.
Okay, so loving the question sounds really poetic and nice, but how do you actually do that? When your heart is pounding and you just want the anxiety to stop? Well, the book argues it all comes down to practicing two really important and kind of counterbalancing virtues.
So the first virtue is patience. But hold on, we're not talking about the passive, just sit around and wait kind of patience. No, research from Sarah Schnittker shows that real patience is actually an active ingredient. It's a tool that helps us keep our emotions in check so we can keep working towards our goals even when everything feels totally uncertain.
And just look at this. This is incredible. Her research found that higher levels of patience are directly linked to some amazing benefits. We're talking decreased depression, fewer health problems, and get this, greater effort toward your goals. So patient people don't just give up. They actually persist, and they do it more effectively.
But of course there's a flip side, right? There's a real danger that patience can just turn into passivity. So how do you know when it's time to stop waiting and actually do something? Well, this is where that second virtue becomes absolutely critical.
And the author shares this really powerful personal story to illustrate the point. So she has a major phobia of driving. And one night she gets stranded at an airport in Texas. The only way to her hotel, rent a car and drive 110 miles at night on a highway she's never been on. In that moment, her time for patience was over. She had literally no other choice but to act.
And that's the whole point, right there. It all comes down to that classic idea: feel the fear and do it anyway. Patience has to be balanced with courage. And courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about feeling that fear, acknowledging it, and moving forward anyway. It's like the engine that takes all that patient thinking and turns it into real meaningful action.
Okay, and here is a super practical tool you can use to build both of these virtues. It's called an if-then intention. It's simple. You just decide ahead of time how you're going to respond to a trigger. So, for example, if I start to feel that wave of anxiety about my career, then I will take 15 minutes to journal about it instead of just frantically scrolling job sites. It gives you a pre-planned, patient action ready to go for when that impatience hits.
So, when you finally manage to combine this active patience with real courage, and you truly start to live inside your questions, the reward you get isn't some neat little answer tied up with a bow. Nope. It's something much, much bigger. And this, really, is the ultimate payoff of the whole thing.
And this is just illustrated so perfectly by the story of a man named Matteo. See, he'd experienced trauma as a kid, and it left him with this desperate need for control. In college, that turned into a full-blown addiction to information. He would stay up all night just doom scrolling for answers. But eventually, he had this huge realization. His frantic search wasn't really about finding information. It was a misguided way to try and cure a really deep sense of loneliness.
Yeah, the real turning point for him was realizing that what his soul was truly craving wasn't an answer that would end the quest. No, the quest itself was for connection. It was for a sense of belonging and for a stronger, better relationship with himself. And those are things that endless information just can't give you.
And this quote from Matteo, wow, it just captures the freedom he found so perfectly. He says he was obsessed with knowing the right answer to get people to like him, but it's so much more pleasant to talk to someone who knows they don't know the right answer. He realized that being vulnerable and admitting you don't know everything isn't a weakness at all. It's actually what lets people connect with you. So we're going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. What question in your own life have you been treating like a problem that needs to be solved instead of a mystery to be lived in and maybe even loved? Because when you make that shift, when you go from desperately searching for answers to having a patient and courageous love for the questions, you don't just find a path forward. You find yourself. You learn that the journey, the mystery, the not knowing, well, that's where all the good stuff really happens.